in this we would talk about serial position effect. What is serial position effect? It means that according to Wilson and Schifrin 1968, when a list of words or some information is given, we are likely to remember either the things that were given to us or told to us in the beginning or in the end, and we're likely to forget most of the times the things that were in the middle. So this is called a serial position effect. I'll give you an example so that you get a better clarity. Now let's say your mother tells you, can you dear please go to the grocery store and get me these items. Now you don't have a paper pencil to write those grocery items. You say, okay, you tell me, I'll remember. So she says, okay, get me, onion, apple, tomato, cucumber, bread, cornflakes, mutton, meat, and so on. So she tells you a few things, okay. Now you are trying to remember, okay, these are the things that she told me. So the first one was onion. I think you all would be remembering that. So the first few words, if you remember, first 3 to 4 items that you remember, that is called the primacy effect or the So if a person remembers the initial part of anything, of an information, that is the primacy effect. Or let's say when your mother told you the whole list, then whatever you remember from the last which she told you, like cornflakes and bread and meat and mutton, whatever it is. So these things which if you remember well enough, then the other list, then it is the recency effect. Whatever you remember from the last part of the information, that is called the recency effect. Now in between whatever it was, we are less likely to remember that. So this is called a serial position effect. Let's do one demonstration here so that you enjoy it as well as you understand it well. Now if you see here, I have given this list to you. I am giving you 15 seconds. Just go through this, and yeah, I think 15 seconds are over, and I'm going to move on to the next slide, and here you go. Now you tell me which all words do you remember, and is it the primacy effect that has affected you, or is it the recency effect, or is it the both, or you actually can remember the words from the middle of the list as well. So you can write your answers in the comments below. So next we did serial position effect. This is a concept that we have learned. To back it up, we have a study, very famous study by Glanzer and cunitz in 1966. These researchers did a study to back up the concept of serial position effect. Now let's study what this study is about. Now this was the second experiment. It is very relevant to multi-store model, and for variations, the researcher introduced a delay between the presentation of the list and the start of recall. So the participants, there were 46 enlisted men in US Army, and participants were shown a list of 15 monosyllabic nouns and read each word aloud as it was presented. So as the word kept coming on the screen, they kept speaking it aloud. There were 3 experimental conditions here, and each participant completed the task in each condition. That is repeated measure study. So you do have to know this and remember this, that it was a repeated measure study, because in 3 experimental conditions, the participants were there in all the conditions. Now in the first condition, the participants began recall immediately after the end of the list. So as soon as they read the list, immediately they started to recall. Now in the other 2 conditions, the participant counted backwards in 3s from a given number and then began recall after either a 10-second or a 30-second delay. So in second condition, there was a 10-second delay after reading the list, and then there was 30-second delay after reading the list. Now the results indicated that the delay, you have to wait and then recall. So this delay between the presentation and recall, it had a significant impact on recency effect in the serial position curve. 30 seconds delay condition, the recency effect all but disappeared. Now this again supports the multi-store model's contention that memory consists of 2 distinct storage mechanisms, short-term memory and long-term memory. Now it was very well seen that in this study the results throw strong support behind the multi-store model on 2 levels. First is that the researchers' findings provide evidence for multiple storage mechanism in memory called as short-term memory and long-term memory. Further, the results that show the primacy effect is produced by LTM and the recency effect is produced by STM. Now, why this happens? So when we start learning the list, the initial words when we learn, they are in the STM and we are still rehearsing, it goes to the LTM. It gets time to go to the LTM. But as we move down the list, as soon as we get to the lower part of the list, this part is just in the STM. It did not get time to go into the LTM. It is just in the STM. So when we recall, the last words that are recalled, those are being recalled by your STM because you recently studied, you recently read it. So it is just in your short-term memory. It did not get time to go to LTM. So these are coming out recalled from STM. And the initial part of the list, the first few words that were there in the list, that had time to move from STM to LTM. So when you're recalling, the initial part of the list is coming from the LTM and not from the STM. So the next is that 30-second delay between presentation and recall was long enough for the words to be displaced from STM. In fact, even a 10-second delay was enough for displacement. So this clearly shows that STM and LTM have functions independent of one another, and it also supports the multi-store model. So this is a quick review of the results. When the results clearly show that in immediate recall, good primacy and recency effect was there. When they repeated, there was no effect at all. When intervals in between words were there, there was good recall because rehearsal was happening. And when 30 seconds were delayed after the reading the list, there was a filler task given to them. So there was good primacy effect but poor recency effect. Okay, also I am giving you in some answers more than one study, because in short answers, the 9-mark answer, you only have to write one study, but in sometimes when the question is bigger, the 22-marker questions, there you have to write, of course, 3 to 4 studies sometimes. So I'm giving you 2 studies here. In case you feel one study is easier than the other, you are able to, remember that one or memorize that one. So the next study that we'll be doing is, so the second study is Murdock 1962. It supported serial position effect. So Murdock in 1962, they studied the serial position effect in relation to short-term memory, and his research supports parts of the multi-store model. So now specifically serial position effects suggest that short-term memory has a limited capacity and duration, and that rehearsal is necessary to encode memory from STM to LTM. Now here the aim of the study was to investigate how the serial position curve was affected by list duration and presentation rate. So that means what is the list duration, okay, and how the presentation rate is, how fast the presentation is being done. Sample included 103 participants. All were university students, and both male and female were used in the study. They were fulfilling a course requirement in introductory psychology. That means all of them were psychology students in particular. And the study was conducted in group of 5 participants at a time. The procedure involved having different groups of participants listening to list of words with varying list lengths and presentation rates. Now lists ranged from 10 to 40 words in length, and the presentation rate was either 1 or 2 seconds. So presentation rate as the word was shown on the board to them, either for 1 second or for 2 seconds. Now the words themselves were selected from a list of the most common English words, and Murdock had 80 different lists for each length rate combination, and participants did 20 lists per session over 4 sessions. These are quite a lot of data that you need to remember, but yes, it is important. Now after each list, participants were given 90 seconds to recall as many words as they could in any order. Now the findings indicated that participants remembered more words from the beginning of the list and the end of the list, which is known as the serial position effect. It clearly shows that it is supporting serial position effect. Here is the graph for the same. You can have a look. So the serial position effect itself is shaped by two more specific factors. The primacy effect, which refers to memory for items at the beginning of a list, and recency effect, which refers to memory for items at the end of the list. So in theory, the recency effect happens in Murdock's study because those words were still cycling through your short-term memory at the time of the recall task. We already discussed this initially. And by contrast, the primacy effect occurred because items at the beginning of the list had been rehearsed in short-term memory already, and then from short-term it went back to long-term memory. So because these words got enough time to move from your short-term to long-term, so from which they were accessed during the recall task. So presumably those items at the beginning of the list had been displaced by short-term memory by incoming words in the middle of the list, but they had been rehearsed and encoded in LTM, so they were later recalled. Well, this is another graph here. Meanwhile, the items in the middle of the list were forgotten. Now, why the items in the middle of the list were forgotten? Simply because they had already been displaced from short term but had not been rehearsed for encoding in LTM. All added up, the primacy and recency effects, as demonstrated by the serial position curve, supports the multi-store model suggestion and STM has a limited capacity and duration that rehearsal is necessary to encode memories in LTM. Speaking more generally, Murdock framed the serial position curve as leading to a significantly higher probability of recall for items near the end of a list because of STM, and slightly higher recall of items near the beginning of a list because of LTM. So I hope you understood this study, that a list is given, these are the initial words, these are the middle words, and these are the end words. So the initial words, when you are memorizing, they go to your STM and your brain is rehearsing it. From STM it goes back to the LTM, your long term memory. So when it is being recalled later, it is coming from long term. The middle words are usually forgotten because now this long term is replacing these initial words in STM, but it does not get enough time to go to LTM because these are being further replaced by the last words. So your last words occupy your short term memory and your initial words have already gone to LTM. So this is coming from LTM, the last words coming from STM. The middle words are usually forgotten as compare because it did not get time to go to LTM and it was soon replaced by the new words in the STM. So I hope this was clear, and the study clearly showed the support the concept of serial position effect.